unfortunately, my webcam is not operating properly, but I just took the time to buy an envelope and went to the post office. It cost me a little bit more since I didn't, have proper stampage, and I was going to send a letter to, via certified mail, so I have to, pay to have the post office go and collect somebody's signature basically when they deliver this to the company. But when you need evidence ultimately, especially if there is potentially a legal case and that might become relevant up the road if you've decided to opt out of a binding agreement. So my advice might differ from other channels that talk about this subject, in that I would, if you take my advice and you go through the opt out of the end user, these binding arbitration agreements, and you listen to my advocacy against this sort of thing and everything, and you take my advice to heart, and you go through this process, then I would recommend that you also do what I did, and it will cost you some money to do. With me, it seems like the receipt about everything and the total cost that buying an envelope and everything else to them was about $580, and everything. But that's a small price to pay. Ultimately, if something, does go sideways and everything, to have, your legal rights fully protected and insured if anything does go wrong, or this is implemented in a way that, like I said in my previous videos on this topic, if they implement it poorly and then wait for the disaster to happen, like I said, that is the class action lawsuit waiting to happen. And, now I have gone through all the steps required to not only opt out of this arbitration, these forced arbitration clauses with my contract with them, but I've also collected documentation and proof that I sent them the letter and everything, and I'm gonna have to go put this in my filing cabinet under, Nintendo as a company, just so, if this ever does become a legal case and everything, and I do become party to any sort of enjoined class action suit against them, that I have proof that I sent them, a document that essentially opted out of their forced arbitration agreements over there at Nintendo. I also took the trouble of printing out the receipt of the item that I purchased, and so, looking at this, they estimate, I bought the console on May 9th per my own documents that I have looked over, so I have exact dates. And the estimation is that they'll receive this on, May 21st, or not 21st, I mean May 24th, per the tracking on the thing. It doesn't have very far to go, so that it's apparently going to arrive on a Saturday at, the May 24th, at Nintendo's headquarters, and, Nintendo of America's headquarters, and everything, that I do not intend to, be bound by the terms of their arbitration agreements and everything. And so I've taken the steps within the time window that you had to do to opt out of this. And I suppose this is not a letter that the company ever expected anybody would go through all of that hassle to, do, but, fuck you. Is all I can say to all of that. I am an absolute opponent of these forced arbitration agreements, and there's a video that I am going to put in the underbar, but it's about employers and everything, and that horror show and everything about how, and why these agreements are terrible, for everybody, or for the end consumer anyways. You're the little guy. They will screw you over, in this if you don't do this. Arbitration never favors the party with less power in, the arbitration. It just never does. You have, if the courts are rigged in favor of the bigger party, or or it's very hard for the little guy to bring a case against a bigger party, and it's a David versus Goliath type situation. It is even harder to do that without opting out of these arbitration agreements. And there's a reason why companies built and constructed this system as a shield to themselves. It's they're protecting themselves, and me opting out of it and taking advantage of this is my protecting my own interest, and saying, no, no, I do not agree ultimately to this. And like I said, I took extra steps. You don't have to send it via certified mail, but you know companies can say, if you don't do this, that they lost the letter, or if they are not able to find documentation, and or if this ends up in a courtroom and it's your documentation that a class action suit is depending on, and it could be years up the road that this happens. You're going to want proof that you sent them a letter that ultimately opted out of the whole thing, and so you're going to want that certified mail receipt and everything to show the courtroom. And in that letter that I sent them was not only the switch, but also the the not the switch, but the thing that was opting out of it, but also the receipt from eBay of the scalper that I bought it from, complete with the order number and everything. And this is all documentation that I now have on file for having gone through the hassle of sending them and everything. I adapted the document, sent it on to them, and all of that stuff, to ensure that my legal rights are fully enshrined, and protected and everything, and opted out. So I have taken care of, what I need to, and I've even gone through the extra steps of sending a certified letter to them. So, the moment they sign this, I will ultimately have proof that they received it and everything. It's going to show up, and once they sign it and everything, and they might have to take multiple attempts, because I don't know that they'll be open on Saturday to receive this, but who knows who's going to be there at the company to when this comes in and everything. And so it's properly documented per the terms of the Yulia and everything, and I've opted out. I've gone through, and I feel good I took the steps necessary to go through the opt-out process. And yeah, I am not bound anymore to Nintendo's bullshit, in their forced arbitration agreement. If you're in the same boat, if you pre-ordered or you buy it in the future, I recommend you go down this route and this rabbit hole, and pursuant to my other content related to this, in my other videos, I will also include the information that I put in the other one into this one, why arbitration. And so you've got the form, but do keep in mind that you're going to have to make some adjustments to it. You're going to have to rewrite it, and this is the Yulia of the thing. And this is a reference back to Louis Rossmann, where I learned about this being a cause in it. This is this is under section 16, and the subsection that the opt-out part in the agreement is under section J, subsection of 16. It's under the clause that you can opt out of it. The 30-day right to opt out is under subsection J, and you have to send the letter to this address in particular to do this, and send it to their CS admin, basically. And so all of those steps have now been taken, and I've got the certified letter and everything, and I am taking my own advice.